symptoms that we would say are more typical of what they should expect when they're getting into perimenopause? And maybe you can also talk about perimenopause versus menopause. What's the difference?
Sure. And you're absolutely right. Women are getting into perimenopause or reaching menopause a lot younger these days. And there is obviously a reason for that, right? So every period is actually a missed baby. I'm going to repeat that because that will kind of set the context for why you're getting into perimenopause so early. Every period is a missed baby. That is how nature looks at it, right? So you're meant to get pregnant. You have the ability to get pregnant on a monthly basis, and when you don't, it then at the end of a 28 or a 35-day period, you have a menstrual bleed, and with that, you sort of remove the inner lining of the uterus. Now, when we reach the age of mid 30s or late 30s, having not looked after our nutrition, not having spent a lot of time in stress, having focused on our careers, and therefore you reach this sort of age already not in a position to have a very healthy baby, then nature begins to sometimes give you skipped periods. We all know that when we are stressed or when we are traveling or some huge accident or an untoward incident happens in our life, we can miss a period. So this is again nature's way of saying, hey, I don't think you're ready to reproduce, so therefore I'm going to miss the period. So these days we find that perimenopause starts early. And we must remember that according to the medical literature, perimenopause can last anywhere up to 1.5 decades. That's 15 years. Now, what does perimenopause means? It basically means that you begin seeing some signs that you are no longer fertile or fully reproductive. This could be in the form of missed periods, but I wouldn't say the odd missed period, especially because of travel, stress, etc., should be counted as perimenopause. It is when you begin missing periods quite regularly, let's say every third period there's some trouble or the other, or the number of days that you bleed for actually becomes lesser. These could be signs that you're getting into perimenopause. Another sign of perimenopause that's a little tricky is that you could have mental symptoms. You begin to feel more anxious, you're not able to cope as much. The reason that this happens is that women are blessed with high amounts of estrogen during their reproductive life. Estrogen is not just the hormone that builds the inner lining of the uterus, it is also the hormone that actually lets you multitask. That's why men can't multitask well at all, but women seem to manage to have, literally 10 hands. So when the multitasking hormone estrogen begins to not do its job properly, you can begin to feel overwhelmed. You're in the middle of something, somebody comes and interrupts you, you lose your train of thought, you're really angry. You begin to feel overwhelmed or emotional. These are all signs also of perimenopause. Inability to tolerate temperature changes especially, could also be a sign of perimenopause. Though, because so many women come in with hypothyroid these days that is undetected, which means you can't see it in their blood test, but they still show symptoms of hypothyroid that functionally trained people like our therapists at Sepalika know how to detect. That sort of thing can also lead to temperature sensitivities, which means you go into a mall and suddenly you need a shawl. 30 minutes into the film, you curse yourself because you forgot to bring that sweater even in the Mumbai heat. These could be signs again of perimenopause. Um, Go ahead, Shada. You're on mute, so you're going to have to unmute yourself.
Sorry about that. So I know some of the one question is that while we understand that these are symptoms, is there something that we need to do about it at this stage? Given that it's going to be, as you said, a decade and a half of a woman having to face these symptoms.
Yeah. And so that is the reason why I mentioned that every period is actually a missed baby. And what this means is that if you can improve your core health and your fertility, then nature will let you stay within the reproductive cycle for longer, which means you manage to delay your perimenopause. Now, how can you do this? Obviously, stress relief is a huge thing. You do need to also make sure that you're consuming the right balance of macronutrients, which means proteins, carbohydrates, and fats, and you need to make sure that you have the right supplementation that is needed. So test at least once in 6 months. Make sure that your vitamin B12 levels are at least above 600. Make sure that your vitamin D3 levels are at least above 60, and make sure that you're getting enough sleep, and that your lifestyle is such that it doesn't look like you're in a fight or flight situation, so nature is forced to push you out into menopause.
And I must add, before, I know if you go to your gynecologist, you may, especially some of you who face more severe symptoms, are likely to be put on hormone therapy or hormone pills. Please, please, our request is don't start on that till you're able to at least address it through the foundational methods of getting your basic health in order, the way Mahesh said. Mahesh, moving on, I'm going to jump now from the menopause to PCOD because I have questions now at the other end of the spectrum. So Prashanti has asked that she's seeing young girls, teenagers who are beginning to experience symptoms of PCOD or missed periods. Does this mean, therefore, that as they get older, they're likely to be heading towards infertility and may struggle to conceive? Number one. Second is that does somebody having PCOD mean they will get diabetes?
Okay.
And the third, one more question. Sorry, I'm going to add because they're all on PCOD. The third one is mammogram, or actually I meant is USG, an ultrasound, the only way to detect or diagnose if somebody has PCOD?
Okay, so quick answers to all three questions. Polycystic ovary disease, as the name suggests, means that basically when you're meant to have a proper ovulatory cycle, it means that in a 30-day cycle, around day 14, an egg is released from the ovary, which can then be fertilized should you decide to get pregnant. Now, in young girls as well as women who get PCOD, this egg release doesn't happen. There are several immature follicles, as they're called, which tend to form these cysts on the ovary. And since there are multiple cysts, it's called polycystic ovary disease. However, this is a little bit of a misnomer because you can also have PCOD without having cysts on ultrasound. So for this, we need to get into the reason why the polycystic ovary disease happens. At Sepalika, we have treated more than, well, close to probably 400 patients with PCOD till now. And the way that, PCOD happens is often in young women due to insulin resistance. Eating the wrong diet, not getting enough exercise leads to weight gain, which again is a vicious cycle. The higher levels of insulin pushes up higher levels of testosterone. Testosterone is the male hormone, and it causes this polycystic ovaries to develop. So naturally, if testosterone is going up too high, especially a more potent form of testosterone called dihydrotestosterone, or DHT, then it obviously means that fertility is going to be impacted. So if you ignore your PCOD today, or even go to a gynecologist who puts you on birth control pills or hormonal pills, which essentially don't fix the underlying problem. They only switch off your own hormonal system and make you have false periods, which are caused by the birth control pills. Then, in the future, certainly, let's say you take these BCPs to try and get regular periods for 3 or 4 years. Patients often come to us like that. And then, when you're, say, 26, 27, you're ready to start a family, you think going off the birth control pills will make you immediately fertile and help you have a baby. That's not quite how it goes. Your fertility is not only not ready, it has been switched off for 5 years. So when you try to switch it back on, it isn't going to start. In fact, it's the old problem there plus 5 years of having not treated it. So that's the impact that PCOD has on fertility. Certainly, PCOD has a direct impact on fertility, and study after study shows this. That's answer number one. Answer number two. So you wanted to know whether there is a link between that and type 2 diabetes. Absolutely. Because not only does insulin resistance lead to high testosterone, which in turn leads to PCOD, and as we all know, insulin resistance is the same cause that causes type 2 diabetes as well. Women who have PCOD have a far higher risk for developing type 2 diabetes at a later stage. And so, yes, PCOD increases the chances of diabetes. And the third question was, is an ultrasound the only way to actually detect PCOD? And the answer is no. Like I explained just 1 minute ago, the polycystic ovary appearance, which is detected by ultrasound, is just one of the ways in which you can tell that you have PCOD. It isn't conclusive at all. We come across many women who don't have polycystic ovary appearance and yet have PCOD. So the correct way to detect PCOD is to take a simple quiz that we have on the Sepalika website as well, and it is based on the American Androgen Excess Society criteria. As the name suggests, androgen means male hormone, and excess is obviously when a lady has too much of male hormones. So, basis the American Androgen Excess Society, you can tell, from their guidelines. For example, if a lady has cystic acne or facial hair, that could be one of the signs of undetected PCOD. So, you don't need to have a polycystic ovary appearance. If you have high amounts of male hormones, if your periods are delayed by more than 40 days on a regular basis, these could all be symptoms that you have PCOD.
Yeah, and this is important, Mahesh, because we see, and I think the point I want to reiterate is having cysts on the ovary does not mean that you have PCOD, or absence of cysts is not PCOD. It does not mean that you don't have PCOD, and it's important because we've seen so many young girls. The whole labeling of you have PCOD because you have cysts is can have such an impact, especially on teenagers or girls in their early 20s. And I think I hope that those who are hearing this is clarified, that it's really does not mean that you're PCOD when you have cysts on the ovaries. You just mentioned insulin resistance. There was a query from somebody saying that is insulin resistance reversible?
Absolutely. And it's not just Sepalika who does it. You have many, many avenues today. There are allopathic MDs like Dr. Jason Fung out of Ontario, Canada. There is Dr. Jichkar out of Pune, India, Nashik, India. So there are so many people, allopathic MDs, who now know that insulin resistance is reversible. It's not really that difficult. It's a very simple equation. If you eat too many carbs, your blood sugar goes up. Because your blood sugar can harm all parts of your body produces, your pancreas produce more insulin to try and push the sugar out of the blood into the cells. When the cells become full of sugar, they begin to resist the insulin because they can't handle so much sugar inside as well. And therefore, you begin to have high blood sugar and insulin resistance. So, the simple way in which you can stop your cells from resisting insulin is by stopping putting in so many sugars into your body. So, this doesn't mean just table sugar, not the white stuff alone. So, all the rotis, the rice, the excess potatoes, the plain carbs, the highly processed carbs like maida that we eat, all of those lead to high degree of blood sugar, which in turn leads to your cells becoming resistant to insulin. So the first step in removing insulin resistance is simply removing these foods from your diet. And we have had so many reversals of insulin resistance as proved in the labs. So one of the simple things that we do is whenever you test your fasting sugar, always test your fasting insulin along with it. This is one of the easiest tricks that is missed by most practitioners. So the easiest way to check for insulin resistance is to check both fasting blood sugar and fasting insulin. If your fasting insulin is anywhere above 5 units, so the normalcy, it will say whatever range, don't go by what is written as normal range in the labs, go by a number of between 2 to 5. Even if your blood sugar, fasting blood sugar in the morning is well under control, let's say it's 85, but your insulin is, let's say, 20 units, you have very high insulin resistance. The good news, of course, is that it is fully reversible just by diet and lifestyle.
Yeah. And this is important because we've seen so many people telling us that for them the focus seems to be only on HbA1c as the number, and the HbA1c seems to be in the normal range, and therefore I don't have diabetes. Whereas what you're saying is that that is just one, and that is a 3 month average. So what is more precise is to look at fasting insulin and fasting sugar. So there's a question that does a normal glucometer measure insulin?
No, normal glucometers don't measure insulin yet. In order to measure your insulin, you actually need to get a blood test done from a lab. So make sure that when you give the sample, you ask them to give you the results for both fasting blood sugar and fasting insulin. Since this is not a test that you have to repeat on a daily basis, you don't have to do it on a home glucometer. Let's say you do it today Then 1 month from now, having made the lifestyle changes, you can again repeat your fasting blood sugar and insulin, and that will show you how how your insulin resistance has come down. Also, like just now Sharda mentioned, HbA1c, while it is the gold standard for measuring 3-month average of blood sugar, remember that you are allowing a lot of damage to take place. It takes years before an HbA1c actually goes into the diabetic range. During that entire period, your cells are resisting insulin. They are somehow trying to not let sugar come in, and all that time you're doing damage to your body if you rely on HbA1c for prevention rather than rely on fasting blood sugar and fasting insulin.
Smita asks, can you use CGM or continuous glucose monitoring for detecting diabetes or insulin resistance?
You can, however, it's not a good way to measure insulin resistance. The continuous blood glucose monitor is now available from companies in India. Your doctor still has to prescribe it, but it's a 5,000 rupee product. They put a small disc on your upper arm, and that constantly measures your blood sugar levels. What we use it for, however, is not to measure insulin resistance. It tells us something else, and it tells us something very interesting. Just what Sharda was mentioning earlier on in this talk, which is that bio-individuality is a unique thing, which means each of us reacts differently to different foods. So, for example, we all read online that millets are great for us and that diabetics should switch to millets. But which millet should you switch to? That is a decision that a continuous blood glucose monitoring can help you. So, the way it works is this: because that little device is continuously measuring your blood sugar, and once in 15 days it transmits data via Bluetooth to a receiver that your doctor has. All you have to do is, once you start using this monitor, keep a meticulous diary of what you have eaten at what time of the day. So let's say that you're a person from the south, and traditionally your ancestors are used to eating ragi. Instead, you choose to eat jowar because it's easily available, or somebody send you a WhatsApp forward. Now, when you eat that jowar, maybe you make it into a roti and you have it, and you have that jowar ka roti. In an hour, if your continuous blood glucose monitor shows that your blood sugar spikes, that means that the jowar isn't suitable for you. This is the way in which you can truly identify what foods work for you and what foods don't, because you will have a allergic hyperglycemic reaction. Your blood sugar shoots up in response to something that should actually be healthy for you. So we have often found in our patients that people that side of the Vindhyas, so south of the Vindhyas, I say that side because I'm sitting in Delhi at the moment, but people south of the Vindhyas often do better with ragi, with foxtail millet, a few of these things that were traditionally there because our ancestors have eaten that traditionally. So you may find that those things react and show in the continuous blood glucose monitoring. So that is the reason we use it. We also use it to see if stress has an immediate reaction. So if you make a note of the stress that you underwent at some time of the day, and we see that your blood sugar is spiking with it, then we know that giving you a breathing exercise at that time is the way to lower your blood sugar. But for insulin resistance, you still need the actual blood test done by a lab.
Yeah, and just on this point on millets, Mahesh, while you did mention that maybe while millets in general are good, it does not mean there's a blanket approval that's given to all millets because it depends on what works for you based on your genetics. The other point that I wanted to add was that multigrain flour, multigrain roti, multigrain atta need not necessarily mean it's good. And I'll tell you why. What I find is that a lot of these multigrain mixes do have, for example, bajra in them. Bajra is a winter grain. It cannot be and should not be eaten in summer. Jowar is more suitable for you in summer. So we, my request is that we all need to do a little bit of more research and sort of understand that what is good for the location where you're based in. So each local and each seasonal. So just because it's multi-grain need not mean it's good. Just because olive oil, everyone speaks about olive oil, doesn't mean olive oil is suitable for all kinds of cuisine, um, or all for all people. There's a related question on insulin. Is fasting insulin the only measurement to take to measure insulin resistance when we go to a lab?
Yeah, so the name of the test is fasting insulin, and you must get a fasting insulin done along with a fasting blood sugar for early detection of insulin resistance.
Okay. I'm going to switch gears, Mahesh, now and move to migraine. um, my favorite topic, because I'm sure a lot of you know that we started Sepalika because I used to suffer from migraines, and Mahesh helped me get over something that I couldn't handle for almost 10 years. So, two kinds of questions, Mahesh. One is on chronic migraines in general. Why does it affect more women than men? And is there any solution beyond us having to pop in a migrainal kind of tablet? And second is migraines or headaches around periods. Can you throw some light around this?
Absolutely. I think these two are related. Question number one and three are related. Why do migraines happen more to women, and why do migraines seem to happen worse before a period? Both of these are because women have far more issues that stem from hormonal imbalances than men do. It is because you've been given the honor of being able to carry the child, and and that is a severely hormonal process, as any woman who's had a baby will tell you. Therefore, there is a play of hormones that happens, and that is why more women face migraines than men. Now, why does it happen in PMS? And this can again explain, how a typical cycle works. So it's very simple. We promise simple language. So let me just break down a 28 or a 30-day cycle into just two hormones that we're going to call. One is called estrogen and the other is called progesterone. And both of them have very important roles to play. If there are any doctors or any medical personnel who are part of this, please excuse any inaccuracies that may creep in because of the simplification. This is for common people. So this is how it goes. So on the first day, you begin your bleed, and let's say the bleed goes on for 4 or 5 days in a normal lady. During that time, you've got both estrogen and progesterone at the lower level. From around day 3 or 4, your body begins to get ready to actually help you produce the next baby. Should you want to do that in the next monthly cycle? So estrogen is a hormone that begins to peak. The job of estrogen, we say, is to grow everything. So it begins to grow the inner lining of your uterus to get it nice and thick, so that should you choose to have a baby, the baby has a place to grow in which is full of nutrition. So inner lining of the uterus is growing with estrogen. This estrogen is produced from your ovary where the follicles are maturing, and that estrogen is growing the inner lining of your uterus. Let's say it's a very typical healthy period. Around day 14, which is midway into the period, is when the egg is released from the ovary, and with that, the outer covering of the egg, which is called the corpus luteum, or the yellow cover literally, that begins to produce the second hormone called progesterone. With progesterone secretion, estrogen goes down and progesterone stays high. And the job of progesterone, as the name suggests, is that it is pro gestation or pro pregnancy, allowing you to protect your pregnancy. So, progesterone stops estrogen from growing the inner wall of the uterus. It makes it slightly more strong. It kind of literally shaves it off, we can say, changes the structure of the inner wall of the uterus, and prevents you from having a period, because in the next 14 days from the time the egg is released to the time when your next period comes, within that, the first 72 hours of that phase, right? So day 12, 13, 14, 14 is when the egg was released, is when you can get pregnant. So progesterone's job is to protect the inner lining of the uterus and not let you have a period. Let's say you choose not to have a baby, or you use protection, and therefore around day 28 is when estrogen will peak again. And when it peaks again, along with it, it brings progesterone down as well. So as estrogen and progesterone both come crashing down, there is nobody left to either grow or protect the inner wall of your uterus, and you have a period. Now, why is this relevant to migraines? This is because both estrogen in the first phase of the period and progesterone in the second phase of the period have the job not only of helping you reproduce properly, but also of protecting you from high stress and from various other things. Both estrogen and progesterone have antioxidant effects as well. Nothing in the human body just does one job. Like all the women, it multitasks. So estrogen and progesterone have the job of being protectors against stress. So as you can see, just before a period happens, when both estrogen and progesterone come plummeting down, there is no buffer against the stress, and you can easily have a migraine. So that's why PMS is a time when you should be extra careful, especially about the foods that you eat, and the various sorts of uh, activities that you do. So that is how migraines are linked. And what can you do about it? Well, what you can do about it is pretty much what every lady should do in the run up to her period, especially if you're somebody who has PMS or pre period migraines. Number one, stop having heavy processed oily foods at least 4 or 5 days before your expected period date. This puts extra stress on the body, and like I said, your body is about to have plunging hormones, so it can't handle the stress. Also, your body is getting ready to excrete the inner wall of the uterus and get rid of other wastes at the same time. So, putting extra waste load on the body is not the smart way to go. That's number one. Number two, we say, what can you eat in place of that? So, at least 3 days before your period, and preferably also the first 3 days of your period, if you eat very sattvic food like a simple khichdi, as your main meal of the day, and you try to avoid as much as possible too much use of caffeine or alcohol and substances like this, you will be doing your body a huge favor. Another thing that we advise all our patients is 3 days before your period starts, try this little home remedy. Just take 3 or 4 slivers of dried coconut or copra. It's available everywhere. Puja shops, Amazon.com is available. Just take that copra 4 slivers and have it with a small marble sized piece of jaggery before every meal. Now, here's the science behind it. Because your body is about to go through severe oxidative stress in the period, this acts as an antioxidant. How does it do it? The copra and the jaggery, as soon as you chew it, you'll realize your mouth begins to salivate. And saliva has potent antioxidant qualities. So, whatever food you're about to put in, if that is going to give your body any digestive stress, this little home remedy can take care of it. So, there are various ways in which we can handle it, but now you know why your migraines seem to happen just before the period onset. Sharda, you're on mute.
Sorry, I have a lot of background sound which I'm trying to keep off.
Yeah.
Is there a difference between a regular headache and a migraine headache, and how does one distinguish?
Yeah, so there are technical ways in which one can distinguish between a regular headache and a migraine headache. Migraine headaches generally tend to be one-sided. This is the classical definition of migraines. Several migraines are also accompanied by photosensitivity. So when you see light, it makes it a whole lot worse. That's again a symptom of a migraine. So we don't get into too much of the classification of headaches versus migraines. It's just a person in distress. The final reason why a migraine usually happens is because there is um, a vasodilation or expansion of the blood vessels in your brain, and many migraine medicines basically help you to contract it, or in some exceptional cases it's the other way around. It's contracted and it helps you to expand. So our idea is, why did the blood vessels in the brain expand? And so because there is restricted space in the brain, it begins to put pressure, and that's why you feel the pain. So we look at the hormonal reasons why that happened. Several times there is also an imbalance in the gut. So just doing the common sense things that anybody would have told us. If you feel the migraine or the headache is coming from acidity, then go easy on the food a little. Take natural antacids, simple things that you can do. The primary thing is, like all healthy animals, go a little easy on food when you have the migraine. There could be a craving for things like chocolate and carbs. This is usually happening because your body is trying to compensate for the extreme pain, but this can often be a sign of a magnesium deficiency. Especially chocolate cravings are often a sign of magnesium deficiency. And the simple way to actually see if you have a magnesium deficiency is not by testing, because real testing of magnesium happens only inside red blood cells, and it's a very expensive test. And the blood level normal magnesium test, which comes in some packages, is pretty useless. So the simple way to test if you have a magnesium deficiency is to start having magnesium supplements, which are easily available. We use a magnesium glycinate form, which is easily available on Amazon. Take it up to the point when your stools become a little loose. At that point, you have reached your maximum dose, so you don't have to take it anymore. But you'll be quite surprised. The magnesium not only helps with the migraine headaches that may happen around the period, it also helps to reduce period pains. I think before the we started the Zoom, there was already a question on how to reduce muscle pains during periods, and that, rather than use meftalspas or any of the other antispasmodics that are available in allopathy, you can resort to them. Of course, we never, are foolish and say you have an office day, don't take a meftalspas, but there are other alternatives. Remember, the mefenamic acid, which is the active ingredient in meftalspas, is also available in fennel or soft. So we have a simple home remedy that we give to women at Sepalika, which is, just a soft and jeera based remedy, where you boil the two of them, make it into a decoction, cool it, and have it, and that can help to reduce your cramping as well. So magnesium and home remedies could be a good way to handle migraines.
Question on spotting between periods. What does that indicate? Second question is related to the same thing. Does it indicate arrival of perimenopause?
Well, spotting between periods is primarily what I explained earlier, that progesterone in the second half of your cycle has the job of protecting the inner lining of your uterus and not allowing it to break down till you decide you don't want to have a baby, right? So from day 14 in a normal period to day 28, progesterone is meant to protect the inner lining of the uterus. If for some reason progesterone secretion is not sufficient, which means either you didn't release an egg during that period, or even if you release the egg, the outer covering of the egg, which is the yellow covering that secretes progesterone, is not able to secrete enough progesterone to protect the inner lining of your uterus. So some bits of it actually begin to fall down in the form of spotting between days 14 and 28. It could even happen in the earlier part of it. That then shows that there is a problem with hyper, or excess amounts of estrogen, and there could be some uterine issues as well, like fibroids. But either way, it finally shows a progesterone deficiency. Now, does the progesterone deficiency necessarily mean you're perimenopausal? Not really. Since hormones begin to reduce during menopause and progesterone falls much more sharply during menopause than estrogen does, it could be a sign that you're perimenopausal. Either way, the answer is, again, to protect yourself in that day 14 to 28 period. Don't, Ayurveda often says, avoid excess heat producing foods during this time. Your body is already going into a heat phase or a hotter phase. And now we have, Sharda, scientific evidence that Ayurveda knew what it meant, what it was saying. So during the first 14 days of the period, the temperature of the lady, the rising morning temperature of the lady is lower. And as soon as ovulation happens and progesterone begins to do its job, the temperature rises up by about half a degree and it stays there till the actual period happens. Again, at the period, the temperature plummets. So when Ayurveda says that a lady enters into a more pitta or a heat phase, and when she's having her period, they knew exactly what they were talking about. So avoiding pitta foods in the second half of the period, which could mean fermented foods, sour foods, foods like caffeine, alcohol, which all produce internal heat. As Indians, we all have an understanding of what foods produce internal heat, even if there's no scientific, Western evidence for it. So if you can avoid such foods or reduce such foods, you may find that the spotting actually reduces. But if you do want to do a scientific test, then 7 days before your period, around a week before your period, if you test your progesterone, you can do a blood draw which gives you a 21-day progesterone. It's called day 21 progesterone, but if your cycle is 35 days, then make sure that you do it 7 days before that, so around day 28. If you test your progesterone, then you will know if your progesterone is low, and then if it is indeed so, there are ways in which it can be fixed.
At breakfast this morning, Mahesh, I was having a breakfast bunch of friends of mine, and I was telling him what a fantastic system of medicine Ayurveda is, and it's tragedy that we know so little of it. And I told them that basically my aim over the next 1 year is to learn a lot more Ayurveda and see how we can integrate or incorporate elements of it into our current day lifestyle. Okay, moving on to our next big topic on mammograms. A, are mammograms necessary? B, if yes, how often should we do them? And C, is mammogram a good way to detect if you are in menopause?
Okay. I mean, certainly the last question first because it's a lot simpler. Mammograms have very little to do with menopause, one way or the other. So you don't need a mammogram to tell whether you're in menopause. Um, okay, so the general question, should you be having preventive mammograms? Because we're all worried about breast cancer in today's day and age. And this is a highly controversial topic. So I'm going to give you both sides of the story. And I'm probably leaning on to one side, maybe at a 60-40. So I won't say that it's a very clear open and shut case and nobody should be having mammograms. So there is a study, a meta study done by an independent group called Cochrane, where we have seen several studies across various different populations across different countries, more than 40 studies, where mammograms were done to see if indeed doing a mammogram led to cancer prevention, as in, did it lead to early detection of cancer? Was the cancer risk truly mitigated by doing a mammogram on a yearly basis? Unfortunately, the answer to that was in people who don't have a genetic predisposition to breast cancer or to certain genetic components like the BRCA gene, which, thanks to Angelina Jolie, we are all familiar about. In such people, there is no great benefit to be derived from doing annual mammograms, number one. Number two, there is now a growing body of evidence that suggests that the radiation that you get from mammograms could be causing a mild elevation in cancer risk. So, unfortunately, the diagnostic procedure itself in people who don't have a genetic predisposition or a family history of breast cancer, the mammogram itself could lead to an increased breast cancer risk. Now, this is pretty scary. And as we know, these kinds of longitudinal studies or studies that are done over long periods of time are not easy to achieve. And even if a mild amount of evidence comes, then I begin to get worried. I would be much more in favor of having actual physical examinations, both by yourself on a more regular basis. Let's say, once in a month or once in 2 months, when you're having a leisurely bath on a weekend, learn how to do a proper physical breast examination yourself. There are so many beautiful videos from MDs, from gynacs now available on YouTube on how to follow the procedure, right? So, how to be thorough about it so you don't miss a lump suddenly or so on. That's a far better and less invasive and obviously, non side effect way of detecting something. And when you must get it done professionally, maybe once in 6 months, when you're of a certain age, let's say you're 45 plus, you've started getting pap smears regularly. At a time like this, you will benefit from going to an experienced gynecologist who can actually do the same breast exam you're doing at home, but do it a lot more professionally and be able to identify any lumps or growths. That is what we are advising our patients. But like I said, it isn't an open and shut case. If you're somebody in whose family history there is more than one person with the breast cancer, history, let's say there's a mom or an aunt or a grand aunt or somebody, in the paternal side, where there's a lot of history, then you may well face some level of better protection from actually getting the mammogram done because you're at a higher risk. So there isn't a simple answer, but if you are just doing it for prevention and you don't have enough of a history to do it, then there are better ways to do it, is what I'm saying.
I agree with you, Mahesh, because I find a lot of my friends, at least women in my age group, tell me that now that I have crossed 50, I need to do a mammogram every year or every 2 years because that's what my gynecologist has told me. So it's good that note of caution that you just put out. There is a question from somebody who says that I have been on a ketogenic and a carnivore diet, and my blood sugar levels are still high. It's extremely frustrating. Is there something that I can do?
Yeah, yeah. So again, so this is why we say that continuous blood glucose monitoring may be a good idea, especially for somebody like this person who seems to be a refractory. So when we look at all the medical literature, people like Dr. Jason Fung, who's a nephrologist whose main work is reversing diabetes, they are often putting people on a keto diet. If you go to examine.com and you have a professional membership and you look at all the studies, you realize that the number one intervention for bringing down blood sugar seems to be a keto diet. And yet people come to us who are on a keto, paleo, carnivore diet who seem to have still high levels of blood sugar. What's happening? So it's important for such people to look at the CBG, to do mild. So, for example, this is what I would do if this was happening to me. I'd put on the continuous blood glucose monitoring. I would stay in ketosis, as in I would either use urine strips to identify that I was indeed in ketosis, and then I would look at my blood sugar post meal and see how my blood sugars were doing. Then I would get out of ketosis. I would cycle out. I would look at using some good complex carbs like vegetables for a short period of time. I would eat those, and I would look at my continuous blood glucose monitoring and see if my body responded differently to blood sugar. So remember, guys, everything that we have as a gold standard, so we say HbA1c 6.2 is gold standard, and below this, suddenly you're non diabetic, above that, you're suddenly non diabetic. That's not quite how it goes with individuals. These are thumb rules given to all of us to make our lives slightly easy so we can catch something before it happens. But it doesn't mean one size will fit all. We've had several people who have come to us with keto for too long, who've had other issues of autoimmunity as well. Whereas, again, the literature tells us keto will reverse autoimmunity. So if you're somebody who has a Hashimoto's thyroiditis or something, going on a keto diet often reverses Hashimoto's. The blood markers all come down. But there are enough people where it causes autoimmunity as well, because we tend to get the refractory cases that nobody else can solve. We see quite a few of these. So my suggestion would be use continuous blood glucose monitoring and work with a nutritionist who is ready to listen to you. This is crucial. So most practitioners, what happens is they finally tell you, if you're not in the book, you're not real. They don't say my book needs to be updated. So the book is meant on history. If new cases present, you have to update the book. So that would
Yeah.
be my advice.
And while we're on keto, Mahesh, since it's such a popular diet trend these days, I just thought we should share with people our own experience with some of our clients who came to us on a ketogenic diet, because keto has fantastic weight loss success stories. And if you remember, we had somebody who came to us wanting to lose weight, and therefore she went on a keto diet. And you remember how she started missing her periods because of keto, because keto meant you took away so much of carbs that the body suddenly thought it was going into, it was stress situation for the body, and it went in a stress situation, body will deprioritize reproduction, it will deprioritize periods, and therefore it shut down periods. So keto is not necessarily good for everybody. And Mahesh, the other thing that I've been reading is that a very high fat and protein diet, and in keto where you barely eat vegetables, or complex carbohydrates, can alter your gut microbiome, or the range of bacteria that are there in your gut, which can have health implications. And because keto is relatively new, those kind of long-term effects have not been studied. So while you are on not that we're discouraging you from getting onto keto, but we just want you to walk into it with eyes open, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, I think again, this point keeps coming back to bio individuality, right? And a keto diet is often a therapeutic diet. I don't agree that it is a way of life. Yes, there are people who go back to the hunter gatherer history. They tell us this is how we lived, so this is how we are meant to live, etc., etc. When was the last time your ancestors hunted or gathered? I'm kind of wondering. And do we really, I mean, is it so foolish? Is the human body so foolish that over millions of years of adaptation, and since the introduction of agriculture, etc., are we saying that our body doesn't know how to handle carbs at all? So I believe that keto is a therapeutic diet. It should indeed be practiced. The beauty of keto is it takes away a lot of the processed carbs, right? So the minute you get on keto, out go your uh, bagels, your croissants, your roti, your rice, and a lot of this is highly processed in today's world. And that's why, maybe you get half of the benefits of keto is from removing dirty foods. But what we don't realize is no food in nature is ever just fats or just proteins. And therefore, there is a lot of dirty keto that keto people start taking. So, for example, there are keto desserts. Try going on Amazon and writing keto desserts. See the number of options that you get, and all of which is full of stuff like almond flour and things which we are simply not used to consuming in large quantities. Which hunter gatherer found almonds all the time and pounded it in a rock mortar and pestle and used that to make keto cookies? I'm not very sure that these are things that nature meant us to do for a very long term. These are therapeutic diets. I mean, Ayurveda puts you on therapeutic diets. There are diets when you eat just khichdi. When you go through a panchakarma for a good 10 to 15 days, you could be eating nothing but the same damn khichdi. But it's a therapeutic diet. It's meant to do a particular thing, not to become a way of life. And like you mentioned, Sharda, a woman who goes on keto must be even more careful to cycle in and out of ketosis, because her body, there is a particular mechanism in her body that tells her that she is fit to reproduce and have a period, and that is called the insulin sensing pathway. So with keto diet, there is no more insulin secreted at proper levels, and because of that, the insulin sensing pathway inside your body begins to think that you're in a famine situation. Why would it let you reproduce during a famine? So it says, let's shut off this lady's periods and let's make sure she doesn't produce a baby at a time when nutrition is not available. So while you can be fat adapted and you can do excellent, you'll run a whole lot better, you'll have a lot more energy, you do need that minimum amount of carbs to produce that period, to be in the reproductive cycle. Unfortunately, till now, nature doesn't seem to have evolved to let a lady have keto periods or keto babies. I'm not sure that this is the healthiest way of doing it. So yes, by all means, ketosis is fantastic, low carb is fantastic, but do it within moderation and do it with some expertise.
Right. So I understand what you meant by women should be careful for its impact on their periods, for keto diets impact on periods. What about intermittent fasting for women? Because I just saw a query come up saying, can women who are in the post-menopausal phase resort to intermittent fasting?
Well, again, the answer is a little tricky, so I will invoke a little bit of Ayurveda to answer this. This is crucial. There's no simple answer. The answer depends on your body type, right? So there are many prakriti quizzes that you can take online. So some of the better ones are like Planet Ayurveda, which is an Ayurvedic products company that's based out of Chandigarh. We don't have any financial alliance with them, but our Ayurvedic Gynac trusts, for example, their quiz. So there are several such quizzes that are available online. The reason I bring up the quiz is, please take a quiz like that tells you whether you are a vata predominant person or a pitta or a kapha predominant person. These are the names of the three humors in Ayurveda, and we've all, because we've grown up in India, we've heard of these terms, vata, pitta, and kapha. If you eat too many beans or raw vegetables, we are told our vata will go up. If you eat fermented foods like curd or pickles or too many dosas or yeast, your pitta will go up, we are told. If you eat very oily, slow moving foods and foods that are very heavy to digest, your kapha will go up, we are told. Right? Now, basis your personality. If you are, for example, a lady who's reached menopause and is a vata dominated person, how will we know this? For example, if you have, let's say, insomnia easily, if you're somebody who's agitated, if you're of a thin frame, if your mind keeps racing, if these are all your sort of personality traits, it is quite possible that you're vata predominant. Now, why is this relevant for intermittent fasting? If a vata predominant person begins to do pretty severe intermittent fasting, let's say beyond 12 or 13 hours, it is possible that their body could actually get into a worse vata phase. So it's very important to know how you're doing. So by all means, you can try intermittent fasting. Like I said, take one of these quizzes, it's for free. It gives you some kind of a hint as the personality you are. If the goal of intermittent fasting is to lose weight, you'd be surprised that there are people who lose weight by eating more frequent meals. Yes, it is an exception, not the rule, but you can lose weight by eating more frequent meals, especially if your body is starved for nutrition and therefore it is holding back the weight. And once you start giving it the proper nutrition, the excess weight or the water weight begins to go away. So there is bio individuality, and once you know your nature, just listen to it and you'll be fine with intermittent fasting.
Okay. Another popular question from women. I know you're not going to be surprised. Women
Paul,
and no, before that, before that, women and belly fat. You've heard me say this before and complain to you. So the question is, and this has actually come on the personal chat. The question is, I eat simple food. I don't seem to be suffering from bloating or flatulence, and yet I seem to be putting weight around my middle. Uh, what is the cause, and what can I do about it?
So this depends on the age of the person. Um,
Don't have it, and I'm promising you that's not my question.
all right, I understand. Okay, fair enough. So I will, sort of put this into two categories then. One is a person who is either perimenopausal or menopausal, and one is for people who are not. Right? Let's take the simpler one.
Sorry, I've just got the answer. She's 45 years of
Okay,
age.
all right. So I would put that into perimenopause, and this is how we would look at it. Now, belly fat is basically coming from fat that we believe is hormonally active. This is what we say. Okay, what does this mean? This means that if at this particular age you are doing things which are not supporting proper removal of estrogen from your body during the second half, or at least at the point when your period is happening, like we said before, estrogen and progesterone have specific roles to play. From day 0 or day 1 to day 14, estrogen is meant to have full play, and from day 14 to day 28, progesterone is meant to have full play. Now, around the day 28, when the period happens, your body tries to break down the excess estrogen, which is no longer needed, and remove it from your body. This is called estrogen deconjugation. If that doesn't happen properly, because your gut bacteria isn't working very well, or you're at that age when you have lower amounts of progesterone and not as low amounts of estrogen, then you will find yourself in a condition called estrogen dominance. This estrogen dominance begins to make you put on weight around the midriff or the belly. So the important way in which you can begin to address this situation is certainly by identifying and reducing insulin resistance. Do the test, do the blood test, look for your values of fasting insulin. And like we said, if it's above 5, especially if it's substantially above, let's say 7 or 8, then you have insulin resistance. And at least your intake of simple carbs, bringing them down, will certainly support removing that belly fat. Also, women often tell me in their 40s that I eat one slice of cake, which is barely 50 grams, and I put on 500 grams. What the hell is happening? So, there is a more acute reaction to processed maida and sugar at this age. So, before you put in that one sliver of birthday cake, be sure that is going to end up around your waist. It's not going anywhere else. So, during this time, especially, be extra careful. See, we suggest very simple practical ways in which you should try and avoid this situation, right? So always carry in your handbag a few dates. If it's a sweet tooth that is hitting you immediately after dinner, have that piece of dark chocolate, or have that date, or carry a few dry fruits with you. We don't even mind raisins. Raisins can often be very supportive for women, especially when they're facing hormonal issues. So a few raisins, two cashews, a little bit of almonds. Just if you eat that and you let your brain calm down and not crave for that piece of dessert, it'll have a huge impact on what happens with your belly fat. So the short answer is, belly fat is often hormonal in nature, and it's vicious. Once estrogen deposits that fat around your waist, that fat itself begins to secrete estrogens, which is a form of estrogen. So it becomes a vicious cycle. So the best way to do this is to reduce your insulin resistance, to try and reduce your carbs, especially the highly processed carbs, and you should see a difference in this.
Thank you. Another practical request, a practical question has come. For various reasons, women need to delay periods. Maybe because they need to go to the temple or a festival or a function, beach holidays, etc., etc. Is there, and there are certain home remedies like eating fried gram dal. Is that safe, or do you have other safer and more natural methods to? First of all, is it safe to delay periods? And secondly, if it is there any effective technique that you can recommend?
Yeah, so despite all the sort of practicality that Sepalika tries to bring to all our patients, this is one of those places where I draw a hard line. Unless it's your own marriage, we will not try and help you delay your periods, because it is almost so. In Ayurveda, there is an injunction that the one thing that reduces your lifespan is suppression of natural urges. So whether it is the urge to urinate, the urge to defecate, the urge to sneeze, or the urge to have a period, so I wouldn't call this an urge, nobody gets an urge, but to delay the cycle, is not something that is good at all. It can often lead to, the way we see it, at least in the Western science, more, endometrial thickness. It can lead to upsetting the delicate balance between progesterone and estrogen. Women often think that it's fine to take a birth control pill at a time like this, or take one of the allopathic ways to delay the period. We don't advise this at all. um, there are no studies that I can cite at this stage. I'm sure if I hunt, maybe I should, that's the important thing. I will hunt up studies that show what is the impact of delaying periods using medicines. But certainly this is not suggested. So therefore, what we do is we instead give them the simplest of gentlest of remedies, and that is tying a black string around your big toe. So we say, tie a black string around your big toe, and this is part of color therapy. And later on in life, I realized that this is also part of acupressure. So there are certain meridians that pass through that whole area, the base of your big toe. So tying a black thread, may help to delay your period, but it will only do it if the damage to your body isn't so severe. This is all pseudoscience. Sorry, guys, I can't back it up with anything at all. I'm just telling you a simple nuska that I heard from, a lady in a village when we used to do work with UNICEF trying to teach women menstrual hygiene. And, sort of this was told to me and several women since then whom I have told it to. It's a 50-50 hit rate. So it could be just a placebo, but it seems harmless enough, and I might just allow that. But every other way of postponing a period, we try to discourage you severely from.
All right. So not so good news on that front. Okay. Another topic, something that we've not discussed so far, is non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. A quick one-liner on what it is for the audience, but the specific question has been that is insulin resistance the cause of that?
Yes, absolutely. And the answer to the second question is yes. There is a resounding amount of literature, scientific literature, that shows that insulin resistance happens for several months, if not years, before a person develops NAFLD, or non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. So the name is very descriptive. There are fat deposits that begin to form in your liver as a result of, generally this happens to alcoholics because the body is unable to process too much alcohol. It puts the toxins in the alcohol in fat globules, and it stores them in the liver for future processing. Obviously, this hampers the work of the liver because the surface area that's available for enzymatic reactions in the liver keeps reducing as fat deposits increase. Non-alcoholic fatty liver happens when there's too much sugar in your blood, and the sugar has to be put away into some cells. So after it's put into, first, let's say, liver cells, for a small amount of glycogen or stored sugar reserve, the body simultaneously is putting the sugar away in muscle cells, fat cells, etc. But when all of those reserves are full, it will come back to the liver where it will thrust it full into liver cells as well. So this develops deposits in the liver which are called non-alcoholic fatty liver deposits. So yes, again, NAFLD is closely associated with insulin resistance. As you reduce processed carbs in your diet, as you reduce insulin resistance, your ultrasound will show, actually, in anywhere between 3 to 6 months, depending upon the severity or the grade of the fatty liver, it will show actual reversal of those fatty deposits as those fats get burnt away.
Right. Thank you. A question on cholesterol. I have high cholesterol, um, and is there a natural way of reducing it? I am perimenopausal.
Okay. So I'm going to take a slightly different tack on this. I'll give you the usual Sepalika answer as well. So our usual Sepalika answer is, we don't think cholesterol is a bad thing. We believe that all hormones are created from cholesterol, and therefore reducing cholesterol, especially with statins, is a bad idea. So everybody gets put on statin medication. They're all told this is a very small dose. People will come to me and say, doctor has said this is the lowest dose he can put me on. Well, it doesn't matter how low the dose is. We don't believe that artificially suppressing cholesterol is the right answer, because cholesterol is something that is made in your body. Most people are surprised to hear that 80% of cholesterol is made in your liver, irrespective of what you eat. So it doesn't matter. 20% is only dietary cholesterol. So 80% of that number is coming from your liver. Now, in perimenopausal women, especially, and this is the special point I want to make on this Zoom call, almost always high cholesterol, once you rule out the dietary causes, will come from a hidden hypothyroidism. If you have thyroid disease that is not showing up in your lab report, so not only is your TSH seeming to be normal, but your free T3, free T4, which are rare but important tests that Sepalika does, even those seem normal. Despite all of this, if you have a new condition that is emerging in the 21st century that is called tissue hypothyroidism or thyroid hormone resistance from your cells, which is similar to insulin resistance from your cells, then you will end up with high degree of cholesterol. In such patients, once we optimize their thyroid function, either by giving them supplements that help their thyroid function better, or helping them lose a little bit of weight, or in some cases, giving them bio-identical thyroid hormone, then we find that the cholesterol becomes normal again. So, if you're getting high cholesterol around your perimenopause, do look up the various resources we have on Sepalika about how you can reduce those naturally, and also do look up your thyroid function. See if you've got other symptoms. There is a lovely article on Sepalika which we often cite to people, which is called 300 plus symptoms of hypothyroid. So your blood tests may tell you that your thyroid function is normal, but if you have one of those 300, usually multiple of those 300, you likely have cellular level hypothyroidism. Back to you, Shah.
Yeah, I mean, I want to reiterate this point because I think every second or third person that we see at Sepalika comes to us with symptoms of thyroid or hypothyroid or a poorly functioning thyroid. However, their lab reports seem normal. They have a discussion with us saying, "Oh, but my TSH, my T3 and T4 are within range." And why are you saying so? Um, and we find that with, and I always tell women this, that people think that heart is the most important organ in the body. I believe that it's the thyroid. Anything, given the number of functions that it does, everything from our basal metabolism, which is how fast we burn our food, how we generate energy at a cellular level, to how cold or hot we feel, to how well our digestive system functions, can often have an underlying thyroid issue. And just by strengthening the thyroid, how a lot of these problems seem to go away. So you don't seem to can even connect that your constipation is coming from a thyroid malfunction. And for most of us, when we face constipation, either we tend to drink a lot more water, we tend to eat more fibrous food, we have isabgol, or we have trifla. Not that any of these are bad and not that they're wrong, but you still face chronic constipation over the years, not able to solve with one of these, then please go and figure out that there is likely to be a thyroid connection. So thyroid is, to me, is um, the guy that is sitting just below the radar, but has such a huge impact on how we function.
Shraddha, there is
Uh,
an increasing amount of literature, and I want to leave this with people because, again, like you said, thyroid is the master hormone. So I would encourage all the people, this is a highly aware group, I'm sure. That's why we're all sitting here on a Sunday afternoon. And I would say that, look up literature or articles that are suggesting that low amounts of thyroid hormone function in the cellular level is almost like a way in which nature is reducing or trying to remove people who are not in great health by reducing their lifespan. It's now thyroid hormone resistance is almost called like a nature's reaction to people who are unable to live the modern life. And therefore, optimizing thyroid hormone becomes a crucial pillar around which everything happens. I tell every patient who comes in That thyroid hormone is like the starter. It's like the starter in a car, and without that no cell can function. So the only hormone for which every single cell in the body has a receptor is thyroid hormone. So getting your thyroid optimized is crucial.
And since we are on women's health, I can't resist but ask this question and ask you to actually explain to everybody the connection between the thyroid hormone and your reproductive hormones, which is the impact of a malfunctioning or underfunctioning thyroid gland and its impact on estrogen, progesterone, and hormone and the cycle, menstrual cycle.
So, I mean, every single hormone in the human body is finally controlled by the master hormone, which is thyroid, right? So, the body literally uses the thyroid as the way to either decide whether you're in a famine state or if you're in a fully functioning state. And therefore, it's no surprise at all that reproductive hormones will be directly impacted by whether you have a hypothyroid condition or not. In fact, Sharda, I won't take any names, but one of our recent patients whom we helped her to get pregnant after 9 failed IVF rounds. This was because everybody was working on her reproductive hormones, FSH, LH, estrogen, progesterone. There wasn't anything she hadn't been given. And yet, nobody had looked to see that she had normal looking thyroid in her lab reports, but clinically she was hypothyroid. The minute we introduced BHRT thyroid hormone to her, she conceived within the first month naturally, and is now touchwood in her third trimester. So we hope to announce the next Sepalika baby soon. But the crucial thing is thyroid hormone decides whether you're in a fight or flight state or in a normal nutrition state, whether you're in a famine or not. So, whenever you have hypothyroidism, all of the other hormones down the line, which is estrogen, testosterone, progesterone, so not just women, so there are lots of men here as well. So, testosterone as well, these are all down the line hormones, all of which are controlled by the master hormone thyroid. So, here's an example that I give. So, when bears go into hibernation, right? So this is nature's way of showing us examples of what might happen to human beings. So when bears go into hibernation, their levels of free T3 drop perilously. They go down so much, and the reason that the bear's body is doing that is to lower the metabolism of the bear so that it can survive without food and water in the winter months when it's meant to just sleep and have its heart pumping. So imagine in a human being who's trying to live a 21st century life, if you have low levels of thyroid, why would you not feel in a hibernation state? That 3 p.m. plunge that you feel, that desire to not get out of bed, that shawl that you need when you enter into a cold mall, that feeling of not being interested in at the end of the long day, your child's birthday party, you have no interest. That missed period that happens, the heavy bleeding that happens, all of this could be coming from a low thyroid function. So all the hormones are linked to each other, and the body will always use thyroid as the master hormone to control whether reproductive hormones work properly or not.
You spoke about BHRT or bioidentical hormone replacement therapy. Is there a right age to start having bioidentical hormones or progesterone supplementation?
This is again one of those questions which is a little tough and highly individual. However, I'll give a thumb rule at Sepalika. See, Sepalika believes on working on the foundation, right? So we often say the ground floor, the ground floor and the first floor are nothing but your diet and your lifestyle. Are you eating the right macronutrients? Is your balance of protein, carbohydrate, fat proper? Are you getting all the vitamins you need? Are you sleeping properly? Do you have emotional connect with your family, with your partners, with your friends? These are the base. And BHRD is on the fifth floor, right? So all sort of progesterone replacement, estrogen replacement, testosterone replacement, I consider it the fifth floor. So I would ideally like to fix the ground floor and the first floor, give your body the right nutrition, and see if it produces its own hormones properly. That's what we do on the Sepalika program. So first fix the ground floor, first floor, because nobody in BHRT often asks, why is this body not producing progesterone? Why is it low on testosterone? If you ask that basic question, you may just go down and find that there's something severely wrong with the ground floor and first floor that people have missed. So again, I'd like to give a very telling example. Another lady who came to last two miscarriages she had, she couldn't get pregnant. Now, here's why I'm linking it back to the ground floor and first floor. She had had gallbladder removal in her younger days. And because of that, she was incapable of digesting fats, because obviously gallbladder stores the bile. The bile is important for, breaking down fats from your diet and making them into cholesterol. Cholesterol sits at the top of the hormone pyramid. All the hormones in the body are created from cholesterol. This lady wasn't able to digest, absorb, and produce cholesterol. Therefore, she had no hormones down the line. They kept trying to whip her ovaries to make more estrogen, to make more progesterone, all of this. All we did was give her digestive enzymes to digest fats and added back fats to her diet. With that, she began producing cholesterol. All her hormones happened naturally, and she went on to have a baby. And she continues with her digestive enzyme and continues to eat fats. Now, I could have easily said, why don't you try BHRT? And there are cases where we do it. But we often like to use it as a later resort, if not a last resort. Why not first coax your own body to make its hormones? If it can't make it, then by all means get on to BHRT. You must remember, bioidentical hormones are far more superior than general, over the counter or pharma made pills that you get. BHRT is made by doctors who compound these hormones in pharmacies specially for you. They make it in a proportion that's right for your body. However, it is for life. And what do I mean by it is for life? It's not addictive like your sleeping medicine or something like that, but it is like Cinderella's shoes. Only till you have it on will it work. The minute you take it off, everything turns back into a pumpkin. So don't think that you can get on to BHRT and get off it. BHRT is a decision often for life. There are some rare cases where we will put somebody on BHRT and still work on their foundation, ground floor, first floor, and then be able to wean them of small amounts of BHRT. Those are few and far between, but therefore I would say, what is the right age to start progesterone? Well, if you're, let's say, in your 30s and you're trying to get pregnant, then you may need to use progesterone sooner. But pregnancy and fertility is a unique case. We don't, that's the only case where Sepalika aggressively recommends BHRT where it's needed, because it's a unique situation. To save you from IVF, IUI, all these factories, we try and get you into BHRT instead. But otherwise, if you're asking when should a perimenopausal woman start progesterone, she must start it when consistently, in at least 3 blood tests, her 21-day progesterone or progesterone blood levels 1 week before her expected period is substantially low, because then she's going to suffer all her life, because progesterone will not start getting made naturally. So maybe in your 40s, sometimes late 40s and 50s may be better. But even there, I would say, go to a functional medicine practitioner who first says, why is it that you're not naturally coping for the lack of progesterone? And then once those foundational issues are resolved, you can take the decision.
There have been a lot of requests for the resources that you've been mentioning on the stock. So, for the benefit of everybody, what I'm going to do is after this, we will post those links to those resources on Sepalika Facebook page, so you can access it from there. If you're still missing it, then please connect with us on Facebook, and we will send it across to you directly. This case that you just mentioned, Mahesh, on the gallbladder issue. So I was doing a women's health talk last week with a corporate in Bangalore, and I was telling them about the same case study where we actually tracked the gallbladder removal as a potential or a possible culprit for the woman's continuous inability to conceive despite IVF, and they couldn't believe it. I mean, they were saying, what has a gallbladder, which we thought was somewhere, which is about storing bile, have got to do with, producing a baby? But see how when you go back to foundations. So Mahesh always talks foundations, and I do the same thing, but I call it north to south, which is everything starts with what we eat, or even sometimes, or even above that, which is the brain, and it all your hormones, everything starts whether it's a pituitary, hypothalamus, everything, pineal gland, they're all sitting here. So you're going to fix, and whenever you have health issues, trying to fix them as what he said is a foundational level, or approaching it north to south, to us is the way to go, rather than trying to attack the where the problem is, manifesting itself, let's say in the uterus or the ovaries or your knee or your hip or whatever it is. It's so much more sensible to do it that way. One last question, Mahesh, before we sign off, and this is on varicose veins. This is somebody who's pregnant, and she says that I hear that the calf muscles are like the second heart to the human body. I've developed varicose veins in my pregnancy. Is this going to be a lifelong condition that I have to contend with?
Okay. So varicose veins in pregnancy, I know I'm not sure about the particulars of the pregnancy. It can often happen. Is the lady currently pregnant? Is that what you said?
Yes, yes, she
Okay,
is.
okay. No, so then, I would say, nothing to do at this point of time. Pregnancy is a unique condition in which one must be very careful about every intervention. But certainly, varicose veins can be reversed after you deliver your baby as well. It depends upon the severity of the varicose veins, and why they came in the first place. So, uh, women who are carrying a heavy baby, often if you have diabetes insipidus, or diabetes during gestation, if you have gestational diabetes, the baby can grow very large in size. That can hamper the flow of blood back from the leg into your lungs for purification. So remember, our legs, so blood goes very easily down. So arteries carry pure blood, so blood travels down easily because gravity is there, it will just take it down. That blood, once it has given the nutrition and it has collected waste from all the cells, has to bring that blood back up to the lungs, where oxygen will be put into it and made into pure blood again. This process has to fight gravity and come up. So nature has built beautiful checks and balances to make this happen. Every few millimeters there's a little check valve that makes sure that once blood comes up, it doesn't slip back again. So the valve opens and closes immediately, and then it comes up, comes up, comes up, and so on. Now, in a lady who's pregnant, I don't know again if she's not been
Sorry,
allowed
she's
to give
just
it.
clarified it's she's post pregnancy.
How many years post pregnancy?
So I'll
Yeah,
wait for
okay,
her to
I'll tell you what to do. All
two
right.
years.
2 years. All right. Okay. So the first thing to do, Sharda, is one of the resources again that we must post for this lady is the exercise of legs against the wall that we've been
Mm.
sharing with a lot of people. So remember, this reverse flow of venous blood back to the lungs is what is compromised. Why do you get varicose veins? Because the system by which the body pumps impure blood back against gravity to your lungs, that isn't functioning too well. Either the valves have gotten weak, or the blood is staying too long before it gets pumped up to the lungs. So this leads to the veins having too much blood in them, number one. Number two, also blue colored blood, because obviously it doesn't have oxygen in it. So because of this, you get these tortured, we call them tortuous veins in medical language. So it's curved and it's full, and it tends to be painful because obviously the vein isn't meant to have so much blood in it. So, and it's blood that doesn't have oxygen in it. So doing the Viprit Karni kind of exercise, so legs moved against the wall at your hips, and then allowing for the blood to flow, not having to fight against gravity and come. That is one way of doing it. Second way, I would say, and this is where it gets a little controversial and woo-woo, is to stand barefoot on the ground. You need to do this, or you can even sit if you want, but 40 minutes barefoot on the ground. Funnily enough, the way in which the veins are able to transport impure blood back to your lungs is using a process that depends upon free electrons in your body. So, if you have too much oxidative stress, that free electrons don't work properly. The earth is the biggest donor of free electrons. So, when you put bare foot on earth, the earth will send free electrons into you. The veins will again get the ability to be able to move impure blood up properly. So that is the second advice. The third advice is to start taking vitamin K, which is very important for the inner walls of the veins to have proper form and shape. So those are the things I would suggest you should try and do.
Vitamin K is vitamin K2.
Yes, vitamin K2.
Okay. And can these varicose veins contribute to deep vein thrombosis?
Yes, they can. That's a tougher condition to treat, because if so thrombosis basically means that some of the blood gets clotted, and then it can break free from there and even go and get stuck in your heart. So deep vein thrombosis is a serious condition. So I would say that try these natural methods of making your varicose veins better. Even acupressure can help, especially when it's done at the bottom of the feet by somebody who understands how to treat varicose veins. I would use these processes first.
Right, great. Thank you. It's been like an hour and a half of, I think, fascinating session as always, Mahesh, covering a wide range of topics on women's health. Thank you so much. And if you do have more questions, please post them on our Facebook page and we will answer them for you, including the resources that we mentioned during this talk. Have a lovely Sunday, everybody.
Yeah, so it's already 12:30, near lunchtime, so we don't want to hold you guys back. Anybody who may have posted a question that we have inadvertently missed, we'll make sure that we, give you the answers on the Facebook page in the comments, like Sharna mentioned. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. Have a wonderful Women's Day tomorrow, and let's hope every day is Women's Day because you guys are in great health.